Now it's time to assemble the Lunaria. You should have 11 large seed pods and 11 small seed pods for 22 total. You will need some scissors and some wire cutters, a ruler, brown floral tape, and then some 18 gauge or 16 gauge galvanized steel wire or florist stem wire. Florist stem wire you get from a floral shop, or a lot of craft stores have them as well. If they have a floral supply section, they usually have some stem wire as well. Those ones usually come in 16 to 18 inch lengths, which will be perfect for this project. But I'm going to be using today some galvanized steel wire that comes on a little roll that I can cut to whatever length that I need. All right, now we're going to start out first. Let's do the stem wire first. All right. So the stem wires, we're going to need 4 lengths that are somewhere around 16 inches long. So let's see, that is pretty close. That's going to be about 16 inches there. And I'm going to use my heavy duty wire cutters just because I'm working with galvanized steel. Your regular wire cutters may not be able to handle this. It is an 18 gauge wire, so they might be fine. A lot of pliers also come with cutters on there that'll work with this as well. All right, now to straighten this out, it comes like when you use galvanized steel, it kind of comes rolled up and you kind of straighten it out. If you need to, you can kind of use a cloth to kind of hold on to it and then some pliers to help you bend it out. But I usually just bend it with my hands. And it doesn't really need to be perfectly straight because we are working with natural components here. Most of the stems are just not going to be straight. Flower stems are not straight. Tree branch stems are not straight. So don't feel the need to make it absolutely perfect. Now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this stem wire with floral tape just to help prepare the surface. Wire is kind of slippery on its own, so if I put wire on wire, it kind of just slides around and it's hard to hold its place. So if we wrap it with floral tape first, that puts down a layer that's a little bit more grippy. Now what we're going to do, I still have my floral tape attached to my little roll there. I'm going to stretch the end. Oh, I just broke it. I'm going to stretch the end of the tape. That's what activates the stickiness. And then I'm going to lay it across the very tip of my stem wire, kind of going at an angle. Wrap the floral tape around the stem and stick it to itself on the other side. And then there should be like a little tag of floral tape sticking up at the top. I'm just going to fold that down and kind of pinch that all together. And then we're going to start wrapping down the stem. Now, just like before when we started the floral tape, we do need to stretch the floral tape before we can wrap it down there. Now, it can be hard right at the beginning to get it started, but if you kind of pinch and squeeze right there at the beginning, that usually helps. Oh gosh, I broke it again. Okay, so I'm just going to reattach. And I'm always going down at an angle. I'm going to stretch my tape to activate it, and then spin my stem. I want enough of an angle that I have a little bit of an overlap, but that I'm constantly moving down. If you don't have enough of an angle, you kind of just spin around in the same spot for a while and it makes a much thicker stem. Alright, so I'm going to do this all the way down to the stem. Now for our full branch of Lunaria, we actually have 4 of these stems. You're going to need to cut 4 of these. I've already got 3 of them put together. So I'm only going to cut 1 for now, but you should have 4 total of these little stem wires that are somewhere between 16 to 18 inches, maybe even 14 inches, wrapped with floral tape and ready to go. Now, just like the stem wires, we're also going to be wrapping the individual wires on each of our little seed pods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit of this floral tape off of the little roll, and then I'm going to cut it in half lengthwise. I do this when I wrap my individual component stems because it's a little bit easier to get a thin wrapping on the stems so they don't get too bulky if I use a thinner tape. So I'm just going to cut this all the way in half. All right, so again, we're going to stretch the end of the tape. And then we're going to wrap it around the little seed pod stem wire right below the last row of beads. I'm going to wrap it around the stem wire and stick it to itself on the other side. Now it can be quite tricky to get this to stick to these little stems here. A lot of people have trouble with that. Usually I just make sure that it's really, really stuck good on there. And then I squeeze right here at the top while I spin it a couple times. That helps it get stuck down a little bit better. And then I'm going to stretch again and angle downward and keep going. Now sometimes the tape is trying to stick to your fingers more than the stem wire, and that may be because your fingers, after you've done this a few times, get a little bit of the residue from the tape on your fingers, and that can make the tape stick to your fingers more than the wire. So if you have like a wet wipe nearby, you can kind of wipe your fingers off every once in a while to get that residue off so that the tape doesn't try to stick to you instead of the wire. So again, you're just going to wrap all the way down at the end of the wire and then break it off. And you're going to do this to all of your little seed pods. So again, wrap it around, stick it to itself on the other side, squeeze right there at the top and spin it a few times. Oh gosh, I keep breaking. I'm not fond of this tape here. All right. Stretch and spin, stretch and spin, stretch and spin all the way down. All right, so you'll do that to all of your seed pods. So one quick little note here, I'm not flossing the stems this time. Flossing the stems refers to wrapping the stem with embroidery floss. It makes it look a little bit prettier. I'm not fond of working with it. It does look nicer, and you can you have more control over what color your stems need to be. So Lunaria usually has a lighter brown stem than what this is. So you can control the color of your stems a little bit better with embroidery floss. The reason I don't like working with it, one, I don't like touching embroidery floss very much. I have a sensitivity to textures in my hands, so I don't like touching embroidery floss. But also I live in an area where it's really, really dusty. I'm in southern Utah. There's dust and dirt being blown everywhere all the time. And so everything gets really dusty really fast, and embroidery floss on your stems collects dust a whole lot faster than just floral tape. And it shows a little bit more, and it's a little bit trickier to clean off. So I don't always enjoy working with it, and I just decided that I wasn't this time. I will put a link below if you would like to see a tutorial on how you can wrap the stems if you want that embroidery floss wrapping on all of your little stems. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to put the individual little stems together. You should have 4 of these stems. I'm just going to show on one, and I've got 5 little seed pods for this one. I'll show you my other little branches here in just a minute. So basically, we're just going to use floral tape, again, to attach all of these little seed pods to the stem wire. So we're going to take one of the seed pods. It doesn't matter which size. You can mix and match all the sizes throughout all your branches. It doesn't matter if you have the same sizes on all your individual little branches that I have. And I'm going to put a larger one at the top, I think. But again, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to lay the very tip of the 18 gauge stem wire right behind the seed pod stem wire, so that it's like right below where those beads are. And then again, I'm going to stretch the end of my floral tape. Sometimes if your floral tape doesn't stick down, you might have the wrong side also. So sometimes if it's not sticking, you can try flipping it over and see if the other side sticks a little bit better. Alright, so again, I'm just going to wrap the end of that stem wire right around, right there, below the leaf, stick it to itself on the other side, and we're going to wrap down. And as we're wrapping down, I'm going to try and make sure that this little stem wire from this little seed pod doesn't start twisting around my stem. So I'm going to keep a close eye on that, and if it starts twisting, I'm going to stop and fix it. So I'm kind of adjusting as I go, kind of pushing it over so that it stays, that little stem wire stays kind of on top. All right, now after you've wrapped down about 1.5 inches there, let me measure that. I usually just eyeball everything. But so that's about somewhere about 1.5 inches there, right below that first leaf or seed pod. Then I'm going to add in another one. Now, each of your little seed pods needs a stem wire that's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. So I'm going to bend my stem right there, right below that little seed pod, and that tells me where I need to line it up. So about right there. And then again, I'm going to catch that underneath the floral tape and then just continue spinning. And you'll want to squeeze right there where that new seed pod is, just to make sure that your floral tape is really getting it secure on there. Go down a little bit further, and we're going to add in another one. Now between these individual little seed pods, you're going to want to go down about anywhere from a half of an inch to a full inch. I would vary it a little bit so they aren't all exactly the same distance apart. I'm also going to recommend that you vary the length of these little stem wires. So this one is a little bit longer here, and so I'm going to make this one just a little bit shorter, maybe about an inch there, right below that little seed pod, and then add that one in right there. All right, so I'm going to add that one in right there, and then we're going to, again with the floral tape, just spin around. Make sure you're stretching your floral tape, and then wrapping around. Let's go a little bit further this time. We're working with something that's natural here, and it doesn't always grow the exact same length between each and every seed pod. The stem wires, the stems are going to vary a little bit. That's why I recommend that you kind of vary it a little bit so it's not all, doesn't look quite as machine made or whatnot. It looks a little bit more natural if you have different lengths there. All right, so again, I'm going to add one in, and I am going back and forth here. I added this one on the right, left, right, and the next one's going to be on the left again. So this one I'm just going to wrap down a little ways, and then let's add in this last little seed pod. No, let's go down a little bit further. Just kidding. A little bit further there so I can get a little bit more length in my arrangement. Okay, so that one's going to be on that side. Oop. Right, then I'm going to continue wrapping down at least to the bottom of all these little stem wires there. I just stopped and straightened those out because that's going to help me to have less lumps in my finished stem. All right, so there is one little branch of my Lunaria stem. All right, so let's look at all 4 of the little stems that I'm putting on my plant. I have one here that's quite long. It has 8 seed pods on it. And then I have another one here with 6. And then I have a really tiny one with 3. And then the one that we just made on camera just has 5. I do recommend that you kind of vary the length or the number of seed pods on each stem. That'll give you a branch that's a little bit more natural looking. But it doesn't really matter if your branches all have the same number on it as mine do. So if you have one that's a little bit longer than mine, it's fine. And it's also okay if you have a different configuration with small and large seed pods on your branches. That does not matter at all, so please don't stress over that. Okay, let's talk about shaping here. Now this is, I'm only doing this now because it's a little bit easier to see now what the results are. But usually I wait to do this until after I've assembled the branch so I know where each branch is pointing. But I want to show this now because it's a little bit easier to see. Now you notice how on this stem, all of my little seed pods, they're kind of going off to the side, and I want to kind of turn all of my little seed pods so that the little pointy part at the top is sticking down. That's usually how Lunaria hangs, with a few exceptions here and there, but generally it's going to hang something like this. So to do that, with your branches, we're just going to bend the stems right there below the little seed pods. And again, I recommend waiting until after you've got the full branch assembled. I just want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. Now notice that I pulled one of the seed pods or a couple of the seed pods back behind the branch. This just gives you a more dimensional looking branch. If they're all sitting on front, it looks a little fake. So if you kind of pull some behind, it gives you more dimension with your little branches, more of a natural look as well. Now with all of our branches made, it's time to assemble them all together into one single stem. And we're going to do that again, just with floral tape. So I'm going to grab the tallest one. That's the one that I kind of want in the back of my little stem here. And let's see, let's grab this one with the 6 on it. And we're going to combine these together. I'm going to give a couple inches below the last seed pods on both of them. And then I'm just going to use my floral tape to combine them. So again, just like always, I'm going to stretch the end of my tape. Combine these 2 stems together. I am going to kind of try and straighten these out. I don't want my stem to end up super lumpy. A few lumps is okay because, you know, A lot of tree branches actually do have lumps on them, but try to not overdo it. We don't want super bumpy, wiggly looking little stems. So again, I'm just going to wrap these two together. Now, if you have any trouble doing this with the floral tape first, it can be a little bit hard to hold. You can get a length of 30 gauge wire in any color and just kind of bind them together first. But I'm comfortable with just floral tape, so that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go down. I don't think I need to go all the way down with this. These are fairly lightweight. So I'm just going to go there for now. I can wrap down the rest of the length later as I add in more branches. Okay, then I'm going to join in another branch, and I'm going to join this one in a little bit further down from the joint of the two previous branches. And I'm trying to round out my stem. So these two stems together are making kind of a flat stem where it's wider this way than it is front to back. So I'm going to try and round out my stem by adding this next one kind of on the back side. That will help round out the stem below a little bit there. So again, I'm just going to attach floral tape, and I'm going to spin that together. And again, I don't need to go all the way down, but I might go a little bit further down this time just to make sure that these stems are really, really combined. Now, I've used an 18 gauge stem wire. You can use 16. 18 is a little bit softer, doesn't have as much support, so they are going to flop a little bit. Until you start adding all of these stem wires together. That's what gives it strength. It's combining all those 18 gauge stem wires together. So they might feel a little bit flimsy until you get all of your little stems in there, and then it should be fine. Alright, so I've got one more little branch to add on, and again I'm going to go down a little ways past the previous joint, and I'm going to add that in about right there. I'm actually going to flip this branch backwards because I want it to kind of stick out this way in my arrangement a little bit. Maybe. I'm going to try that. Okay. So I'm going to flip this one backwards a little bit. I'm going to put it right there on the front side of my little stem. Right. And then again, we're just going to use the floral tape to attach it to the stem. And again, if it's a little bit hard to hold and get everything to stay in place, if it's not wanting to, you can use that 30 gauge wire to bind it together like I said before. And this time with this last stem, we definitely do want to wrap all the way down to the bottom of the stem. Alright, so I'm just going to wrap down to right there where all those other stems end. Try and secure that really well, and then I can use some wire cutters to kind of trim them all to the same length there at the bottom. Alright, now let's talk a little bit more about shaping. I already showed kind of how to shape the leaves, the little seed pods. Now this one works the way that I showed in the video because it's leaning to this side, and then those seed pods are going to kind of go down. This one sticking up, I'm going to have to do a little bit more creative rearranging of my little seed pods to make sure that they are also all down or somewhat down. And then I've got this little one over here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to kind of turn my little seed pods. Now what I'm doing here, I don't want my seed pods to just be flat. I'm trying to create more dimension on my branch so that it goes this way as much as it does side to side here. So I'm going to pull this little 3 branch backwards a little bit to create some front to back dimension. And then I'm going to put these little seed pods so that they kind of point down. And I'm going to do the same thing with this little 6 one over here on this side. Kind of pull it so it's kind of middle between this tall one in the back and then the shorter one in the front. And then the shorter one, let's see what happens. I did this one backwards, and I can always fix that if I need to, but I want to see if I can kind of do this way where it kind of pulls forward and bends down. Alright, so I'm going to take the seed pod around the back side, that one over the back side, and this one down there, and then I'm going to move that branch there to be kind of middle. So you see how I'm kind of trying to create volume this way and side to side. Alright, so play around with the shaping of your branch. Try to create something that looks fairly natural that you would see on an actual plant. I'm going to pull maybe even pull some of these forward a little bit more. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that for now. I can always change it later if I want to. I do that as I'm arranging things in arrangements. I just walk past it for several days in a row and kind of fiddle with the shaping of things. But for now, I think that works pretty well. All right, so there is the Lunaria for our arrangement.